Hello, sorry, I've started a new stream here. Let me turn this around. Um, I don't know if it's my router or YouTube, but the picture will freeze or the sound will go out, and um, it still has the old one live. So I'm in the wrong one now. Let me see. Now one live, two live streams. I have two live streams going. I don't know how that's possible, but let's try this one. Hello. Okay, I'm live now. Hopefully, I haven't lost everybody. Uh, oh well. I'm just gonna wait here a few minutes and see if we can get um, anyone else to join in. Okay. I see someone else just joined in. Let me know if you can see here, and hopefully the picture isn't frozen now. It's a little bit of a delay. Okay, back in business. I'm sorry if I missed your previous questions. Let me see if I can look at that older one to see what the question was. Nope, not that one. Um, Sorry if you just give me a moment. This was the other live. I can see the comments still. Nope. Okay, I see a second person has joined. Come back. And I will be up and painting again in a second. I just want to give people time, and I just want to get back to see if I can find the earlier stream where there was a few questions left out there. Okay, hold on. That one. Which one's the old one? Oh, here's this one's the old one. Okay. Let's see if some of those questions are still there. Okay, so do I paint portraits or do I expand to more things? That's what Jellybean asked. Allison asked, thank you so much for answering. Very helpful advice. And then Jellybean says, is the picture frozen for anyone else? It looks like the picture had been frozen for a while. Oh well. Um, Hopefully you guys can find me over here now. Okay, so I have three people back. Unfortunately, I may have lost a few people, but um, oh well. That's uh, that's the trouble with these live things. They never go exactly how you want. Okay, so now you can see I've gotten a little bit further, and I am laying in some of the colors that you might have missed some of that as the because the picture froze up. Please, I wish there was a way someone could hit me in the back of the head or something when the picture freezes because I'm not always looking at it as I'm painting, and I would rather know sooner rather than later. Okay, so I need to see a little bit more of his neck to get some of the color. I'm gonna drag some of this blue black that I painted for his shirt. I'm just gonna drag it in, but I need to go darker in that. And so it looks like the light source is warm and the shadows are, I want to say, cooler, especially where the blue is reflecting into his face. Although I'm seeing a lot of warmth in both the shadow and in the light side of the face. So maybe I can revise that. Maybe these hot lights maybe are a little bit cooler. They're looking very yellow though. Have to make a decision at some point. It really is ideal if you have the light side warm, then you want the shadow side cool, and vice versa. And that will give a better sense of light. And it is possible to have a very neutral or white light on your subject, in which case the shadows will also be neutral also. And then it's more or less the flesh tones that affect those colors. Oh, so Cyver said, I thought it was just me because the audio was keeping up. Yeah. Well, you can sometimes still hear me, but the picture will completely freeze up. And I can see from what was on the screen that it had been frozen for a little while. So, oh well. What I like to do after a little bit of time is I'll make time lapse videos from the demos, and if I have a nice clean recording, then it's a little bit easier to do that. This one, if I make a time lapse video, it is going to jump from just sort of the early preliminary drawing to all of a sudden having a bunch of color in it. But hey, it'll just look like I painted really fast. Okay, get in. I'm gonna restate these eyebrows a little bit, and then I have to make sure I want to come back in and measure again. So who else was able to make the leap from the last video? I don't know if I lost anybody since there's six people here, and I think that's about how many people were watching the video before. Okay, so I'm missing some of his features and some of the gesture in his face. And that gesture is really important, especially when you're trying to get a likeness. Gesture is sort of the tilt or the slant of different things, how quickly something moves from one form to the next, one feature to the next. It'll be kind of the gesture, and then some of getting the sort of some critical measurements will really help keep that sense of likeness. It is possible to have a likeness and have your measurements off, but it's usually it creates kind of a sense of distortion. I mean, there is distortion in the photo already just naturally, but you have to be really good to distort the face a lot and still keep the sense of likeness and not have it look too much like a caricature of somebody. Some of those mannerists were really good at doing that. Want to move his nose, I think, just a little bit further out. Yep, just there's a little bit of room, and I this is where my lightest light is going to be on his face, and I'm going to want a really clean, fairly clean white there eventually. Okay, so I'm happy to answer more questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk about my process as I'm working. Still, really, one key thing is to do lots of comparison between the resource, whether that's live or from a photo, is just look back and forth between the two and see where you can see obvious differences. And the more you create you correct the greatest differences, the quicker the painting starts to come into line. I am going to mix up a background color here. This week I decided not to show my palette. I had been backing the camera up a little bit so that you could see both the painting and the palette, but I, I've become worried that I was moving too far back and I was losing some of the quality of the picture so that people could see the texture of the paint strokes, that sort of thing. Okay, so um, just, yep, I think I still am not frozen, I hope. Yep, not frozen. Okay. So mixing up some of the background color, and I want to make sure that the color I use for the background is similar to the other paintings since this is part of a companion piece. So sort of that bluish green color that sort of varies as I go. And lots of light sort of try to get the edge of his eye ball there, and his cheek really cuts back here, and then again, so his nose pushes past the edge of his face. And I'm going to have to play with the lips a little bit. I'm not quite getting the shape of them quite right yet. Okay, something like that. That helps a little bit seeing it. Okay, so um, let me just close this other window I have open. Great. Okay, so off a lot in the color and some of the values here. It's a lot more orange in the forehead, but I don't want it to be too colorful. It's more of a neutral. The orange is more towards neutral, and getting again some of those neutral colors right really does help make the flesh tones and the sense of realness a lot more believable. It makes the realness more believable. Boy, really having problems with language today. And let's his eyeballs are you don't really see a lot of color in the eye here. I don't really know what his eye color is, but if I get those dark enough, and I get the white of the eye in this case is kind of a dark blue. Let's start to refine some of these shapes a little bit so I can sort of see where I am. Not really liking the placement of that eye though. So if I look the edge of the nose, the corner of the eye is just a little bit out from that. So just about there. So let's make sure I get that. Yep, that's a little bit better. And then I can sneak in just a little pinpoint of light right in that corner. That was a lot bigger than a pinpoint, but let's clean that up a little bit. So we start to see where the other side of his iris is. And then the lower lid has quite a bit of red in it as it comes up. Not a big change of value. Okay, so this is a good starting point that I can start to refine around. I can sort of work out in concentric circles until everything starts to fall into place. Got a lot of green, yellow. There's this color combination I tend to like where there's a green mixed with orange that they sort of neutralize each other, but they kind of make this muddy green, muddy yellowy green. And I find that's a color that I end up using a lot where I see something kind of going yellowish into the dark. It doesn't have any yellow in it, but it's because where the yellow and the green mix is sort of more towards the yellow hue. And I find that a real useful color mixture. Here I'm going to throw in a little bit of the purple too. So I'm working with some um, secondary colors. Again, my words sometimes escape me. Okay, and I'm going to add a little more definition to his eyebrow. And I want to make sure the lines in his forehead are following the perspective. Okay, there's a bit more orangey pink in there in that part of his forehead. It's very light, but that's the direction. Let's see if I can get that color. Yep, that's better. I think the hardest thing for people when they're copying a photograph, I mean, not really copying, but using a photographic reference, is that there'll be some subtle changes in values and colors in the photograph, and the tendency is to really exaggerate, go way overboard in every place where there's a subtle color change. And if you do that all over the place, then the painting starts to fall apart. It doesn't look right. If you're able to capture that sense of subtlety, then things come together much better and really creating a sense of atmosphere and form and a sense of reality when you can have control over those real subtle changes. Okay. I'm hoping the sound is coming through. I'm turning the sound up just so I can check on it. Yep, I hear my voice there. Okay. I had 1 week I did a demo and the sound started looping, just like two or three syllables of one thing that I said just kept on looping over and over again. Um, and then finally I saw a text where someone was saying something I didn't understand what they were saying, but they were telling me that there was problems with the audio. And it really was like 40 minutes of the demo was this thing that kept on saying, uh, it worms. That's what it sounded like it was saying. It worms, it worms, it worms, over and over again. I wasn't surprised that I lost a lot of the audience at that point. Okay, so here where I did a lot of green, I just pushed it a little bit too far, and so I'm going to put in some colors around it and maybe bring it back from the brink a little bit and add some of the warmer colors that are also coming in there. And this is where I'm talking about like really looking at what is the subtlety of the colors that you see and getting those right. And it's amazing how fresh and real it will start to look very quickly when you're able to mimic those colors. So I'm doing that here as best I can. You need to go a little bit darker and redder in that one spot. And so let's take another stab at it. And this line of his upper lip is out just a little bit further. And without having it in the right place, his mouth just doesn't look right. So need to work on that a little bit. And the the bow shape of his upper lip, I just don't have in the right place yet. Meaning that little um, dip in the shape of the lip. Let's see if I can refine that so we start to feel those forms resembling his actual features. I'm just going to also make sure that the nostril's in the right place because it's not yet. Okay, since you dropped out, you guys are very quiet. So again, happy to answer questions if you're interested. And like I said, it's fairly cold over here tonight, but I have the heater blowing on me, so um, it's not too bad at the moment. Okay, and I really want to feel this shape of the upper eyelid, which means I have to kind of go darker around here. Trying to, I went a little bit too purpley. I need to bring in some orange to get it back in the right direction here. Knock down some of the values here. I mean, it does go lighter right in the spot, but I had it too much lighter. And then the hair isn't quite dark enough. So we start to push that a little bit darker. I'm using something called chromatic black. It's a Gamblin product. It's made up of two complementary and transparent colors, so it makes a nice transparent black. It's not a true black in the sense that it's a black pigment. It's a mixture of two, of quinacridone red and turquoise, phthalo turquoise, and it has some interesting properties. So to get a nice rich black, you really do have to get several passes going. Okay, let's keep on going and refining this. I think this one's going to be important to get the likeness right and the believability of the forms. Let's see if I can get the lower eyelid here to read. Well, really, the upper eyelid first. It just has a little bit of light reflecting off this one spot before the cheek comes out. That has a bit more red in it. Okay. I can just with the brush cut into that a little bit more so it's the right thickness. And I want to make sure I have this alignment right. It's really super important. Okay. Um, I did a quick live spot announcing this on Instagram. If anyone out there did come over from Instagram, I would be curious to know that. So I know to um, that that's a good way of announcing. Been trying to figure out how to promote this darn thing because if you do it too far in advance, people are like, it's a live thing, but that's going to be Tuesday night. I'll try to remember. And if you do it too close to the time, then you don't really give people enough warning. So it is kind of a tough thing. And since I'm doing this every week, some people just know now that I do this on Tuesday nights. Okay, so I have this eyebrow off a little bit, so I just have to push it down a little. This is where you can use the paints just to move things around easily. See how easy that was? Okay. And then I do want to make sure again that that shadow area of the face gets dark enough. So I'm pushing some of those areas darker as I go. That looks a lot better. I'm going to get a little bit smaller brush here to indicate where his pupil is. You can barely see it, but it's right there. And then he has a little bit of reflected light around that. I'm going to come in with some of that same color that I'm going to use in the background. See if I can get it in the right place. Well, I'm going to have to adjust it. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. And let me correct the bottom edge of his nose. It's a fairly, almost like a dark line that's on the bottom edge, and then it comes right into the nostril. That's a dark, it stops right there. Okay. And then this light on his nose is just a little bit thinner. And there's quite a bit of red or color that you can see right along the edge of that shadow. And then the tip of his nose is a little bit of a softer red. And let's make sure I have the light coming down far enough. Okay, that's looking a lot better. It's a little bit fussy, but it doesn't look too bad. And again, there's a little bit of a line a darker edge along the edge of his lip there. So I'm just going to use that to my advantage. Okay, want to make sure he has the right, his eyes look right, you know. Just a little bit, a hair off, and it's going to look weird, like he's cross-eyed or not looking in the right direction. Okay, and get a little bit of the eyelashes here. So one thing, this is a portrait commission, and one thing I've been doing with these commissions is that if I make a video of them, then I'll make a time-lapse video for the client also. It's not something I can really promise, and a lot of times I have some technical difficulty, but it is a kind of nice little bonus thing to say, hey, I did your portrait, and go to my YouTube channel, you can watch a video of it, a time-lapse video. I'm just going to type in something real quick. Hi all. Welcome to my live painting demo tonight. And I just want to say, please ask questions okay, and let me know where you are watching from. Good. Sorry, my typing's a little bit off tonight. Okay, and I just see someone said Mediers has been here before last week. Is greetings from Columbus, Ohio. So welcome. And I never know if I'm pronouncing someone's name right, but Mediers, I think that's probably close enough anyway. So I'm already starting to get a bit of a likeness, but it's clear that there has to be some subtle adjustments around his eyes to sort of get sort of those folds that the eyelids looking right, and making sure that the value structure is right too. So some of the farms look like they're moving in the right direction in space. Again, because this is a commission, I want to make sure that the likeness is um, within reason, that it's a good likeness. I'm not doing sort of a master. No, I'm no John Singer Sargent is what I'm trying to say. I'm not gonna get absolute spot on, but close is usually pretty good. What I don't want it to do is I don't want it to look overworked. So keeping some of the spontaneity. That I think that's a lot of times why people hire me. Besides the likeness, is just the freshness of the brushwork, and so I try to make sure that I keep a fair amount of that and not get too tight with the brush, not use too many small brush strokes. Okay, so he has this kind of, in his complexion, he has this area that's really reflecting the light. Kind of has a little more orange and yellow in it, but it goes pretty light. And I want to get that same feeling of the reflectedness here. And I have to go, I think, a little bit thicker with the paint to kind of get the texture to come forward a little bit. There's a few areas. Now, some people paint impasto the whole painting, and I do like those paintings too, but I find that I like doing it most when just where the lightest areas of light are and there's a lot of reflected light, sort of creating kind of a texture that draws the eye, and then having other areas of the painting thinner and not quite as uh, not coming forward quite as much with the texture. I think that's starting to work there. It is. I'm not getting that the closer edge kind of right yet, but it'll just take a little bit of adjustment. Okay, so Traha Pace 150. What's up, dude? This is my first time here. I saw your work on Instagram and you rock. Watching from south side of Chicago. Well, thank you, Tra. I don't know if I can pronounce that. Traha Pace 150. What's the weather like in Chicago tonight? I would imagine that it's pretty cold. I know that you guys have gotten a little bit of snow over the last few days. Okay, so I'm trying to do this a little bit of a. There's a lighter area, and then it softens as it comes down the towards the upper lip, creating kind of this swoop of the form. And so I'm trying to make sure that I get that, so we get that feeling of the form in the lip coming forward. And then I do want to transition into these lighter blues and greens for um, to sort of have get his the coloration of his stubble in his face. And then typically the muzzle area of the face will be yellower and greener, and so I'm just looking for that an excuse to add a little bit of that color in. Let's see if I can get the shape of his lower lip corrected there. I think that's going to help quite a bit. It really does come up a little bit higher and lighter right here. So I'm going to come in with some pure white just right on top. Well, it didn't quite sit, and I have a little bit too much pink on the brush, but there we go. That's what I wanted. So let the thickness of the paint do a little bit of the work, do some of the heavy lifting, and then I'm going to carve a little bit with this background color. There we go. So all of a sudden now his mouth is starting to have the right shape to it. Can um, do a little bit more altering to make that look right. So it's about 14 degrees outside. Okay, well that is cold. And Madeir says, when you said Sargent, I just remembered a quote by him which I read in Cincinnati Museum, where he said, start with a broomstick and end with a needle. Yeah, I don't think he really lived by that though. And I think about a lot of his paintings. He did finish off sometimes with some um, very broad, artistic. What would you call them? Almost like showy strokes. Um, he really wanted the painting to look like he was almost like a fencer attacking the painting. But I know again he would make sometimes 100 attempts at the same brushstroke and wipe it off and then do it again until it looked like he just did it right just one time. I do know another quote by him. He said, a portrait is a painting with something not right about the mouth. And I always found that really funny and kind of true. That the more you try to make it look like somebody and what they're doing with their mouth, it's really hard to make it look right. Okay, so I think I need to come in here with, um, come in here with the dark of his shirt to really set off his face. I just saw that his lip did come down a little bit further on the outside here, and I wanted to correct that. But I'm afraid I gave him a little bit too much chin, and I'm really eager to correct that so that I don't make him into Jay Leno by mistake. And Jennifer Stevenson says, hey, AJ joining from Ontario, Canada. glad you've got heat again. No, actually, I don't have heat. I just have a little space heater, but right now it's 44 degrees in the house. And my family has abandoned me for a warmer venue. Um, so, but for this painting demo, I had to come back here to my studio and to get it going. The heat will be fixed a week from Thursday, and that was the emergency scheduling. So, wonder what would have happened if we didn't tell them it was an emergency. And get the sleeve here. Don't have to be perfect with that yet. And there can be a little bit of play between the background and the shirt that make an interesting edge going there. Okay, so let's see if I can adjust the shape of his chin a little bit, not give him quite so much chin. I think that's a little better. As I get further along in the painting, I'll be able to see those relationships better, and then I can make finer adjustments. Let's pull up his chin a little bit. I don't want to give him I don't really want to give him a double chin. He doesn't have one, so. Okay, let's see if I can get some of the feeling of his hair with the hair product that he has in it. I'm gonna need a lot of like grayish blue there on top to get that kind of feeling of the light bouncing off the hair. Okay. Okay, and I do want to make sure I give him the right amount of brains here, so it's important to pay attention to the overall shape of the head and come back and measure to make sure it's right. And even though in the photo there's lots of black around his head, I really do want to make all the area around him lighter and sort of to match the painting of Tamara that I've done last week. For those who've just come in, this is a companion piece. It's part of a two portrait set, and they're supposed to look like they are meant to go together. So by giving a similar treatment to the background, that'll help unify them. Okay, I'm going to keep on going here. So really, I'm still pretty crude around the eyes. There's lots of adjustment that has to happen there. Just, you can look at them and see they're not there yet. Sometimes you can come in and just nail it the first time, but usually it does take really slowing down and getting those real subtle relationships right. And what's typical is the curvature of the eye should be generally points down a little bit in relationship to the frontal nature of the face. The ball, you're really seeing a lower part of the ball of the eye in the opening of the eye. You tend to see more of the lower part of the iris of the eye than the top, unless someone is just really um, looking down, and you can then see the light part of their eye above their iris, but that's more unusual. Okay, want to get his dimple that's there. Make sure I get that right. Okay. I'm just going to keep on going. So I'm starting to build up some of the lights, getting much thicker there. The shadow side of the face, I can keep it fairly thin. There's no reason to get really thick with that, especially if I'm using fairly transparent paint. It is really starts to look strange if you get very thick with transparent strokes. And sometimes those values will change depending on how much light you have in the room, and can look kind of odd in some lights and then look okay in others. So I try to avoid that if I can. The other thing that I've been really focused on lately um, is the glossiness or the matteness of surfaces and have a little more control over that. And so what I'm starting to do more often is add gal kid, which is a type of medium, to the paint in the very dark areas to get kind of a glossiness. Uh, so I can get a level of dark that haven't been able to reach before. It just gives me a wider breadth of values. It's almost like adding a whole other octave on a piano that you have to work with. And this is giving me a lot more area to really get a greater sense of form. And but I've been tending not to use the gal kit in the lighter areas. And at some point, maybe I'll experiment with that a little bit. But for now, I've been using it with a fair amount of success just in the various darkest areas. So I might put a little bit in his hair, for example, where I really want to get black blacks going. Okay, this is, I'm getting totally the wrong color here. So let's see if I can fix this. Those colors around his ears, I just have not had not been very careful. Now I can start to see the shape and direction of the ear and the size. So let me see if I can get some of this working. And I'm not going to paint his earbuds. They're a little distracting. Plus, it's just not really fitting of the type of portrait that I'm trying to do here, where their gazes are engaged and they're looking at each other, and it just doesn't look right if he just has earbuds in his ears at the same time. Well, they're easy enough to paint out. I did a version, cleaned it up in Photoshop initially with a little bit of back and forth with the client to get approval. And so I photoshopped that out, but in this particular photo, I'm using one that it wasn't photoshopped out, but I can just easily not paint them in. Okay, I can see here it's much darker than what I have here. So I have to start adding reds and blacks to get the amount of shadow that's needed. Just keep on working out from there. And then I have even a darker dark underneath that. I'm really going to push that. Sometimes you can easily get too much white in the paint or too much white on the panel or canvas, and it's really hard to overcome. And especially in your darks, you want to try to keep white away from, especially if you're going into a very dark shadow or something like this shirt where I need to get a very um, rich dark color. White um, will really work against you in that case. Speaking of white, I need to even out some of the values of the chin here before it starts to read. Now here's a case right in this lower part of the chin has to go very black, and I already have too much white on the panel. I'm just going to rub it a little bit with a towel so that when I come in with a almost pure black, that I'm not going to have too much white mixing with that. And there's a little bit of the shirt, even as dark as it has some light hitting it that's lighter than that underside of the chin. So I'm just going to make up a little bit of that color as close as I can and just put it in just to get a frame of reference for how dark that area needs to be. Let's get some of these other lights going. When I say lights, like the lighter part of the shirt, which is still pretty dark. Okay, hopefully you guys can still hear me. I'll do a sound check at some point. Let me see, I can do one right now. Yep, yep, the sound's working. Sound's working, the picture's working, and everybody's happy. Okay, now I kind of feel like this is starting to progress, starting to look like something, which is probably the most exciting part of the painting when it really just you know that you're on the right track. And then after that, you're terrified that you're going to mess it up. So it's a double-edged sword. I did a painting recently where I liked the initial lay in it with the hand. It was really loose and spontaneous. It had no detail in it. And I decided that I was going to do everything I could not to come back and refine the hand. I just wanted it to be those initial loose brushstrokes. And it was interesting because the other hand was very refined and well defined. And so it's an interesting contrast between the two. Most people would say, well, you really should treat them the same, but I think that the fact that they're different adds a lot more interest to the painting. So I'm trying to get some of these transitional colors in here that really give character and the turn of the cheek. A little bit of a greener blue here. As I get in these transitional colors and I get them looking right, that will really help give the sense of form, where things are turning, where the light's hitting. Here I have a little bit too much stuff going on right here, so I'm just going to see if I can simplify some of it. That's one thing I found too. It's sort of a rookie mistake is that when someone has a photo as a reference, they'll try to copy every little detail of that reference. And what's important is to simplify it so that what you want people to look at has the most going on, has the most contrast, has your darkest dark and your lightest light near each other, so that really that just becomes your focal point and you're just saying, hey, look over here. The rest of the painting is just support. This is what I want you to look at. And if you do that, then the paintings tend to be much more successful. Okay, really starting to get the feeling of that, the flesh there now. And again, a little bit of greenish gray happening in that upper lip area. And I need a little bit more white here. There, okay. And I gave him a little bit too much movement on that upper lip there. I'm going to try to sneak a little bit of orange in here, where that transition is in the lip. Doesn't have to be a lot, but there's it's too light in that area, and it really needs to be darker and grayer. So let's see what I can do about that. There we go. That's looking better, and I just need that accent in the corner of his mouth. So with the mouth, you see the separation of the lips, but generally, and a lot of people miss this, is the forms that come around it. Usually form just kind of like a little soft C shape with the flesh. I want that little bit of a darker orange that comes in right there. Let's see if I can mix orange, red, and black to get that color. There we go. That may be a little bit too much, not subtle enough. Let's see. I'm going to keep it that way for now. Sometimes it's not a matter about changing a color if it looks wrong. Sometimes it's about changing the colors around it. And that's, I think, this case, the colors around it aren't dark enough. um, yes, I'm leaving the earbuds out. That was the question. It's just not a good fit for this particular portrait, and not what the client wanted. Um, and I assured her that I was not going to put the earbuds in. So no earbuds. Often, and when I was doing portraits with some women that had nose rings, initially I would tend to leave them out, but I just found that that was an important part of their character, and so I try to make sure that I put those kind of things, leave them in. Things like tattoos, if I can do them with some justice, I'll put in earrings, whatever jewelry there might be. So I'm just refining some of the contours here to make sure they look right. And I'm going to have to cut into his cheek a little bit more. Got a little bit too, it's a little bit too far out, and need a lot of white to get back to that color. It's not too bad. It's a little bit bluer and darker than I wanted, but good enough. Yep, that's looking better. And that white, I just have that real thicker line. It really needs to be softer, so I can just a little more paint, just push it out a little bit. Yep, that's doing it. Let's soften up this edge a little. Not looking too bad. Okay. Yes, good choice to leave the earbuds out. I had someone comment earlier that he thought that it looked like he was bleeding from his ears, not that they were earbuds. So, even for that reason. Let's get a little bit of red coming up into his nostril here. When I say red, in this case, it's reddish gray. Mostly black and naphthol red. Okay, just again refining values and colors until some of the forms start to read correctly. It's got a little bit of green coming in that area and on the upper lip here. A greener green. Nope, too dark. So adding just a little bit of white. I can go darker here. There we go. Okay. So if I look back and forth quickly between the resource and the painting, then things will start to jump out at me that just um, are are the furthest off. And then if I continue to correct those things, just keep on working in that same way, then it starts to pull together very quickly. Need this subtle change in values from here to the darker area of the nose. It's a little bit of this red, dark grayish red shape that comes from the side of the eye here. Let's make sure I keep it dark enough here. And then this comes down, then kind of fades off. And then we have a lighter orange shape right next to it. And a little bit of a reddish zigzag. So I'm just copying shape to shape as I see them here. Okay. So um, I'm curious to know how many people here are interested in um, working as a portrait artist or looking for commissions or trying to make a living sort of in that way, and who is just interested in just learning how to paint faces just more recreational or doing non-portrait figurative work. It's helpful for me to know what my audience is looking for, what they're trying to do. I can always give tips and things. I'm learning myself about painting and the market, but I'm kind of finding out things as I go. I'm happy to share whatever I've learned as I'm doing it. For example, I had to make a decision recently about having a some sort of shopping cart um, for commissions, for sales, for doing prints, things like that. So I went back and forth a lot between Etsy and Shopify as different possible solutions for me. I really wasn't looking to build a shopping cart on to my um, website or doing that development work. I was looking for more of kind of a plug-in solution. In the end, I ended up using Etsy for various reasons, and it's been working out so far. And I've gotten a few commissions through Etsy. What tends to work with Etsy is driving some of your own traffic to the shop as opposed to getting, um, I guess, what you used to call um, walk-in traffic or off-the-street traffic. And that's kind of how it feels with Etsy, that people kind of show up on your page and they start asking you questions, and you don't really, that's the first time you've ever had contact with them. And then there's other people that you kind of develop a long relationship with, and then eventually they commission you or buy a print or something like that. Okay, let's keep on going. Things seem to be going okay. Don't like the amount of white of the eye I gave him there, but I am going to clean up the bottom edge of his nose a little. Give him a little bit less nose. And give him a little more nose right here. And I need a little bit of the background color to do the rest of this. Okay, that color is getting a little bit muddy on me, but brighten it up a little. Okay, now I can get a nice clean edge on the nose there. I think that looks better. Okay, let's keep on going here. Keep on moving. Okay, really got sort of that, dig into that crevice there on the side of his nose. Not crevice, but crease. I can soften up that edge a little, bring it up a little higher over here. Okay, that's looking a bit better. Okay. Okay, someone ask me a question quick because I'm getting a little too quiet here. I'm going to put in a bunch more of his shirt right now. Just get a little bit more of the value structure going in this whole painting. So I'm going to try to put in as much as that as I can. I'm going to pull out my bigger brush, get a lot of black on it, on the palette, get a little bit of the blue, mostly ultramarine blue in this case. Come on, a little more blue. Okay, there we go. I think that's approaching the right color there. So this color is pretty solid dark blue. I'm going to get a little bit of the phthalo blue in there too. So it's just looking a little too purpley. Okay, you can see where I make it a little transparent here. It gets a little bit too bright, and that's where I'm going to have to come back later with some mixture that has a lot more black in it. So the edge of his chin, if I'm looking, there's sort of this a little bit of an angled line down. Have that pretty close to being in the right place. And I can keep some of the sketchiness of those brush strokes as long as in the right value range. I think that'll add interest and a little more spontaneity to the painting. Okay, so Elephant Blue says, "What's on your palette?" Um, so usually I'm showing my palette, and tonight I decided to show more of a close-up of the painting, is to show as much of the painting as I could without backing up too much. And I use gambling colors. Um, I use the colors with the highest tinting strength that I can, and so that gives me as uh, much ability to mix the widest range of colors possible. And if you're curious about those colors, I do have a post on my Instagram feed that's just showing my palette, and I give a list of all the colors. And that's a pretty good resource there if you want to know what colors I use to paint, but I can name them real quickly. I have um, chromatic black. I have phthalo emerald, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue. Uh, what is that color? Dioxazine purple, alizarin permanent, quinacridone red, naphthol red, permanent orange, Hansa yellow, and tonight I'm using titanium white, but I've been switching off with um, brilliant white also, which is a Gamblin product. And the difference between titanium white and brilliant white is just the binder is different. In one case, it's safflower oil for that brilliant white, and it's linseed oil for the titanium white. But the color in the paint itself is the same. Okay, gonna do put a little bit of his bicep in here. Just sort of rub it in a little bit, and I want the shadow underneath his arm to read. Bluish, blackish, reddish color, something like that, which is sort of a purpley. And then I'm going to have to create a little more background color to adjust the sleeve there. Or it's not the sleeve, the where his chest comes down is over just a little bit. Something more like that. Okay. Okay, so I have all the major elements in now. I have a little bit of the panel left to cover, but not so worried about that. Okay, so, and Jennifer asks, I don't paint portraits, but I'm interested in improving technique and learning more about what the paint can do for me. Painting wet and wet, etc. Okay, that's great. And Elephant Blue asks, thanks for the reply. No cadmiums. Nope, no cadmiums. Um, unless you know what you're doing with the cadmiums, you have a specific use for them. It really is kind of a waste of money to buy them because they're extremely expensive and have kind of a very soft, warm quality to them. And for my thinking, I use them to mix with a lot of colors, and I like the tinting strength that you get with modern colors. They're much stronger than the color of cadmium colors. So, for example, this quinacridone red is got huge tinting strength. It holds on to its color with. You can add a lot of white, and it still holds on to its color. You cannot do the same with the cadmium color, and so I'm gonna have to throw some more white on my palette here. And the same with naphthol red and with permanent orange. They're much stronger than CAD colors. And the Hansa yellow that I use is something similar to a CAD yellow light. It is a little bit over to the green side of yellow, which is a little bit bothersome because you can't get kind of a really pure orange yellow if you're mixing it with the permanent orange. But overall, it I'm able to get the strength of color that I'm looking for. Okay, I just because I was talking about the tinting strength of the quinacridone um, red, I just ended up mixing a huge pile of it just because I was sort of painting out loud. So now I have to figure out what to do with this huge pile of pink that I just put on my palette. Maybe I'll put it in the arm here. Okay, something like that, at least for now. throw a little pink into here, but that's too strong a color. Okay. Okay, so now I really got to start to refine the sucker. Um, and sometimes it's a little hard to do when in a live painting to get down and do a lot of refining, but um, this is kind of a workout for me to be able to do that, to hone in and focus. Fight that ADHD off a little bit longer and really get in there. So I'm going to make his nose a little bit shorter than I painted it. I can just see that I made it a little bit too long. He does have a fairly short nose, so it's um, have to be really careful not to make it too long. So I need to mix up a little more of the background color. Okay, that looks closer. Let's do a little bit more plastic surgery here. Okay, that's good. And then I can push it out a little bit too. Does his tips just a tad further out. Okay, that's starting to look right. So I have to say overall, well, the problem with where the painting is that all these transitional colors are too pronounced. And so either I need to soften them up or adjust them, or the areas between one color and the next I can soften up a little bit. Okay, let's see if I can still get that thickness of the paint there, but just um, soften up, like I said, some of those transitions. So we need to go a little bit lighter there. And interestingly enough, when you're painting wet into wet and you're having a hard to the right color, sometimes, like, let's say you need to make something lighter and you keep on mixing up a lighter version of that same color. Sometimes what you realize is you just need to put white, just paint white straight on, pure white straight on that area if you're trying to bump it lighter. It's the white is mixing with what you already have down, so that the only way to really get there is coming in with a really strong compensation of the color that's down there to the color you want to get to. Okay, I'm doing a lot of squinting right now because I want to see those relationships, how subtle or abrupt they are, so that I can try to mimic them. Like I can see his dimple, there is a harder line right up along the the fold there, the crease. But um, as you get away from the dimple, it really does have to be much softer. Something like that. And then, so some of that starts to read. Let's see if I can get that transition again that I had before. Okay. Yes, no cats. Okay, and again, I have to adjust his upper lip, make sure that it's coming out far enough. Okay. So it is about 10 to 11 right now. I've been painting for almost 2 hours. I'll probably continue on till about 11:30, um, which because I'm not going to finish this tonight, but I just want to make sure that it's in really good shape to finish later on in this week, the next couple nights. And So I want to see how much I can get done in the next half hour. So I'm as vigorously trying to make whatever adjustments I can to wherever it is I think this thing is off. Okay, this is where I might come in with a little bit of pure white, even though I'm not seeing white there, but where it just can mix with some of the paint that's already down, then that'll be helpful. I have, I made that a little bit too high because I do have another bit of reflection highlight that's right here on the fold of the eye right there. Let's try to get them both in at the same time. Then I can come back in with that orangey green color that's underneath his eye and just clean that up a little. That's looking pretty good. I almost start to see the bits and pieces of the structure of the eye. And then mess it all up with one stroke. Okay. Nope. Okay. So right now I'm just, again, comparing, looking back and forth, seeing where features are off or I haven't put in elements or something's contrasting too much, and just keep on adjusting until it starts to pull together. Okay, I just looked at something I was going to repaint. Now I don't remember. So let's put that in for now. Get the green back in. Okay. Want his lower lip to be out just a tad further. See if I can do it without, I think I need my smaller brush for that. Sometimes you just need a smaller brush so you don't mess up everything that you've already done. Not that it's the worst idea, but here just a little more white. Okay, and this comes back a little more sharply. Not liking the length of his nose. That seemed to be having a problem with that. Yep. Still, I need to trim it a little bit. Okay, let's switch brushes again. Okay, this is my Again, a fairly thin brush, but with long hairs. I can get some nice long strokes out of it. Okay. Who's still with me here? So I can, if no one's really paying attention, I can just shut it down. But last time I said that, a bunch of people popped up and said, no, keep on painting, which I'm happy to do. Okay, wondering if I made his lips a little bit too low compared to where the nose is. It's not too bad. I think I have the one side of the mouth a little bit too low, which is making it not read properly. Just gonna bring that whole thing up a little. That's better. Okay, adjusting his upper lip again. Probably adjust it a few more times before I'm done. Let's pull his iris over just a little bit. That's better. And that little shape on the far side of the eye is over just a little bit. Yeah. That looks good. And let's give him just a little bit of highlight here on the front of his lens. Okay. Okay. Let's see if I can squint or get a little bit of distance here so I can compare them a little bit better. Got his dimple over a little bit too far. I'm just going to paint it out and paint it in together. Paint it in again. Sorry. So if I look, this corner of his nose, this comes through right here. It comes down a little bit straighter. And then this is the same. Okay, good. See if I can pull his lip up just a little bit. That means the center line of his mouth also has to come up. Sorry about bumping the camera there. Give you guys a little bit of vertigo. And again with White highlight. Okay. It's just interesting how subtle the difference is in his mouth, and it's not quite reading right just because of that little bit that's just off slightly. I think that's going to be better. Okay. So I hope you guys are doing out okay out there still. Pull this shoulder up just a little bit higher where it comes into his chin there. So I'm not sure. I think we had all Americans and Canadians tonight. I didn't see anyone from anywhere too exotic. Okay. I can give it a little stretch here. Uh, Keep the joints loose. Makes for better painting. And it looks like my battery is going out again. Let me see if I can check this real quick. Turned off of YouTube for a second. And come back. Don't cut out. Okay, you're back. Sorry about that. I just wanted to check the battery. I'm down to 20%, and that may be the factor that I end on. If it completely drains while I'm painting, then um, and it goes out, then that's going to be it. But I think I can go another 20 minutes, half hour with the charge that I have, and I'm going to try to get a little bit further with this. Yeah, I did really go too pink in the neck there, just trying to mix that quinacridone red to show what it can do, and it got really bright. Okay, has some yellow orange colors here in the jaw. That sort of changes to a different direction than what I had. And a little bit, oh, keep on bumping into that camera, into the phone. Sorry. And I really want to get the sense of that, the anatomy of his neck, where the Adam's apple is, where the jugular is, coming up here, and where the neck goes into the light. Essentially, get that right shape going. Okay, I need lots of yellow and lots of white. Get that adjusted here. That's better. Okay, that yellow is definitely too strong. So I'm going to have to gray that up a bit. And didn't really do a great job with this ear, so let's see if I can fix that quickly. Sometimes you don't have to say a whole lot with a form. If you just put it in the right place and the right colors, you can get it to read correctly. Okay, well, okay. Let's keep on going here. Soften up this here, get the turn of that form from his dimple. And then I got to go darker around it. So here I'm fighting I have quite a bit of white paint everywhere on my palette. And now I'm trying to get these darker colors in the shadow side of the face. And there's quite a bit of paint there already. And I'm really having to overcome that. It kind of creates like a little bit of a ghosting kind of color that I don't want. There's some areas where I don't have enough gray in the face, where the colors are just a little bit too bright and they're not reading properly. So I need a big area, kind of a dullish reddish color, to go back and fix some of that. That is not the right color. Okay. So I've been playing around a little bit with advertising on social media, trying to figure out what works. And a lot of people say, oh, you should use YouTube. You can narrow down a demographic and advertise just to them. And but I've been trying to figure out what is the demographic for people who want an oil painting commission. I mean, you can say, well, it's people with more disposable income, and you can put things like are interested in museums and country clubs and concerts and things like that, and that may get you the right audience, but but you end up paying a lot of money to get everyone else that not really interested in portraiture at all, but you're still um, buying the impressions to send it to those people too. And there's not, as far as I can tell, there hasn't isn't a good way yet to know who is that buyer that's going to want a portrait. I mean, I know from experience that people who eventually contact me for portraiture work, they're not what you think of as your target audience. You wouldn't necessarily know that they have disposable income to work with. They just saw a painting, they wanted it, and that's what they want to do. But how do you judge those people in advance? And so this is where Etsy has been really helpful to me um, because when they're there on the platform, it's generally because they're looking to buy something. And if they put into the search engine custom portrait, it's pretty clear that they're interested in commissioning a custom portrait, and that's the client that I'm after. And so you can advertise on Etsy. And so the interesting thing about that, as opposed to advertising on Google or Facebook, is that they've already self-identified as someone who's interested in commissioning an oil painting. If they're looking up custom custom portrait from photograph, the only people that are going to put that into the search engine is people who are looking to commission a portrait. So those are the people that I'm advertising to. That essentially you're buying impressions. I'm sorry, you're getting impressions um, on through Etsy, through advertising essentially, but you're only paying for the clicks. And to me, that's very efficient. If you look at Facebook, for example, you're paying for the number of impressions, $3, $4 for a few thousand impressions. And in those impressions, you may not be hitting anybody who would be a potential customer that they wouldn't necessarily be in a sorry they I'm gonna take a little bit of break. My brain is starting to go. Um, so I'm sorry if they're on Facebook, they're not necessarily looking for a portrait painting. You're just targeting them because they're essentially the demographic that has disposable income. And so paying for all those impressions, I just think that that's not very efficient. Although you'll hear a lot of people talking about like, you can really get down into the finest degree of demographic. You can even get down to each like targeting a one person. I heard news uh, an, a broadcast where someone was talking about how they were targeting just one person on Facebook to advertise exactly what they might want as kind of a practical joke. Someone who knew the person really well would, figure out what would be kind of funny or strange if someone was advertising to them a particular product or service that just matched what those person's preferences were. And it was a pretty funny episode. I think it was of might have been of Radiolab. I'm not sure, or um, This American Life maybe. But it was pretty funny. It took the guy a while to figure out that, or he never figured it out. It wasn't until the roommate told him like what he was doing that he started to understand the magnitude of the whole thing. Okay, now I'm afraid I made his nose a little bit too short, but I'm gonna leave it that way for a little while until I figure it out. I'm just gonna give him a little bit of a more of a curve at the bottom. Maybe that will do the trick. Yeah, that might have. And his nose needs to be straighter. No swoop. Okay. Okay. Um, Still going here. I think maybe just about 5 more minutes here. I think I'm starting to lose my ability to concentrate. And what's nice again about the house being very cold is that I can just leave this for several days, and the paint will just stay wet on the panel. Eventually, I'll have to move it somewhere warm and dry for it to for the paint to dry completely. And since this has to ship before December 13th, I really do want it to start to dry when I tell it to. let's get some of that right color. Again, this is just adjusting some of those transitional colors and values until I have the right value down, and then it will start to read correctly. Okay. All right, I am feeling a little tired now. So, as much as I appreciate the extra watch time, I am going to call it a night. So, thank you all for joining me. Please, after I end the stream, leave a comment for me, not in the comment feed, but in the actual comment section of the video, so that it leaves a permanent comment there. I would love to get a little bit of feedback from you, or tell me how you thought it went. Um, I'm just going to type right now. Thank you all for joining. For maybe some of those who have the sound off. And have a great night. Okay, great. All right. Thank you again. And if you're not subscribed, I encourage you to do so you get notifications of my live feeds in the future. I'm contemplating taking, uh, when we get to the end of December, taking a few weeks off because Tuesday is Christmas falls on Tuesday and New Year's falls on Tuesday. So we'll see what I want to do about that. But anyway, have a great night, and I hope to see you all back here next week. And do have to do something.